Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Henderson, and I would like to welcome you to the Fourth Branch Podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the conversations that matter to all of us. Today, our discussion will be around the reality of bias in our society. How do you think your previous experiences, close friends, co-workers, and those you trust have influenced your views and interpretations of the world around you? Have you ever judged one person based upon the actions of others? If the answer is yes, then I think that the deep questions that everyone must ask are, how were we influenced, and how does it affect our lives and the lives of others? In your view, have we collectively reached the dream where content of character finally means more than the color of a person's skin? Is bias, judgment, and differentiation just a part of human nature? How do you know when a decision is based upon racism or bigotry and not simply upon what is best for the situation? As is customary at the Fourth Branch, we want to know what you think. We encourage you to simply look at the world around you using your own mind and your own experiences. When we discuss a topic, we would like to hear what you think about it. How does it affect you? How does it affect your family? How does it affect your friends, your neighbors? At the Fourth Branch, we want you to tell us what you see. We are still all in this together. Welcome to the conversation. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Fourth Branch Podcast. My name is Atal Osama, and I am here with my good friend, as always,
Brian Henderson.
And we are excited that we have a guest with us today. His name is Chris Morgan, and Chris, very, very happy to have you on, man. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And what would you like to discuss today?
All right, my name is Christopher Morgan. I've known Colleen most of my life since the early 80s. I work with Uber security for CSC. We do big events like the Super Bowl and EDC, Coachella, almost every concert in Southern California, and then work for Instacart and Amazon Flex. So, we got a wide things we could really talk about.
I know earlier, Chris, you were expressing some concern about whether or not football has somewhat of a glass ceiling when it comes to executive positions and even head coaching positions with regard to race. Do you still think that that's something that we see in 2023?
Yeah, it's not gonna change until we actually get more people of color in higher positions. You know what I mean? Because I look at college, you got to realize there's over 300 schools in Division I football, whether on the FBS level or the FCS level. And and there's more black colleges, or more black college coaches on the FCS level only because there's more of the historical black colleges are on that level. But you still have some in other, mostly predominantly white schools. There's a few black head coaches on the smaller, level, but there still needs to be more black head coaches. I mean, a top black coach beside Dion in the FBS is Franklin from Penn State. We had what's his name, David Shaw for a while, and we had Mel Tucker, but they're gone. You saw what happened to Mel Tucker. And also you had a few more. You also had Herm Edwards at Arizona State, which I think he shouldn't have got fired. And then you had the guy that he coached at 3 different schools. The one that was a coach at Texas A&M and Arizona and one other school. Oh, yeah, and you still got Max Strong. Where's he now? He's at some other school now. One of the lower level schools. But he's still on the FBS level, though. So it's not that many African-American head coaches. I think we still need more. I think they can bring a lot to the table, but I think they know they can coach. I don't think that's the problem. I just think it's just still too much politics and the way boosters go and alumni go. It's too much of that, still running schools, because that's the main problem right here at USC. You got a good head coach offensively, but he ain't worth a damn defensively. You know what I mean? His defensive coordinator is horrible. He has not addressed defense. Even when he was at Oklahoma, he didn't address defense. That's why they never were totally successful. They did well to make it to the big games and make it to the big dance in the playoffs, but they could never win it because they didn't have the defense or defensive personnel and they never recruited.
Yeah, but
I blame the head coach.
But can you tie that to this was a decision? These are hiring decisions based upon what the person looks like. Are those two things related?
I say it's going down. Like I said, I don't think it's a question of these African American coaches can't coach. Like I said, I think it's more to do with who's running the program, and I don't mean just the head coach, or even the athletic director. I mean the president. Like case in point at USC, everybody out here wanted Urban Meyer, but fortunately, the little dwarf didn't want Urban Meyer because of what was tagged to him. The athletic director wanted Urban Meyer because he got the athletic director from Ohio State. And what happens 2 years after he couldn't get Urban Meyer, he ups and resigns. Now we have a female athletic director. So it has a lot to do with who the presidents are, who's the board of directors, who's the governor. They get involved too. So it's a lot that goes into it. So
I guess my question is, I think you could make an argument that regardless, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, you could make an argument that the best qualified person was not offered the job because of how they looked. I think you could make that argument then, but can you make that argument now? Brian, I'm curious to know what do you think? Do you think that in the bombastic world of college athletics, or even if we look at the professional level, do you think that business decisions are being made and we are not going to hire the best person because we want to maintain a certain look or maintain a certain keep a certain segment of our fan base happy?
My personal thought on that is yes. Because the question is, do I think there's any part of it, right, that is that? And I think, yes, absolutely, that still works. And I think it's because of one principle that people are discussing a lot now, and it's, intrinsic bias, things that maybe you're not consciously saying, I don't want this person, but I'll give an example. I watched a game the other day, and the quarterback came out on the field, and I think they said he was 19 years old. And they said, man, it's amazing, how mature this guy looks. Look at him. I mean, when you see him without his helmet on, the guy looks like a CEO. He looks like an executive. And I've heard that many, many times. Looks like an executive, looks like a leader. Words are not deceptive. They are what they are. People say what they mean. And I could try my best to look back through all of the years I've ever watched college football, and I've never once heard someone describe a black person as looking like a leader. I've never heard that one time. Not to say that it hasn't been said, but I've got a good cross section of football watching, and I've heard it a whole lot of times for young white men, but never have I heard that for young black men. And I say that not to call everyone racist. I say that to say that there is an intrinsic bias that starts at a young age, at an early level in the career, that can, I think, influence how people make decisions. And then more critically, when you say appeasing the fan base, absolutely. Because if you look at, and I'm sorry for calling these programs out, but if you look at the Southern programs, Ole Miss, Alabama, Mississippi, you've got to know that the fan base is not quite as happy if the leadership doesn't look a certain way. But I'm not saying that it's all pure racism, because that's where I think you draw the distinction in with that question. Money is involved, and where money is involved, there's people involved, and you've got to try to please the people that might not even think the same way you do. So that's kind of where I would look at that. My answer is yes, but maybe not as horrifying as people might think.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that a business decision would be made if your the athletic director at Alabama or USC or Clemson, or you're the general manager of a professional football team, and your job is to field the best product that you possibly can, it doesn't make good business sense to me, I think, to dismiss. This is why the Deion Sanders hire made so much sense to me. He's the best one for the job. And to circle back to, the Chris's original statement, I don't know if it's just a matter of hiring people just for the sake of having more black faces.
That was like Brian said, that was a money decision. They knew if they got Deion, they had the money coming. They probably made more money with Deion this 1 year than they've had.
Oh, no doubt about it. But
that plays a lot into it too.
Is that to say that these decision makers are intentionally hurting their own product because they don't want a Brian Flores or the Eric Bieniemy or I can't think of any up and coming college coaches right now, but is that what you think? Do you think that someone in that position would intentionally damage their own product? That's the part that I can't square.
Yeah, I believe that. You're seeing that right now with the Arizona Cardinals. I think they're intentionally damaging their product because they want the number one pick.
Yeah,
they traded their quarterback that should have won all but 2 games this year if they finished every game.
But you're not saying that. But you're not saying that they won't make a hire. They won't make a hire based on that.
They already did. Remember, they got rid of the Kingsbury last year, who I thought did a decent job the whole time he was there, despite not having any experience.
Sure.
As a head coach, as a head coach on that level, he had a head coaching job in college. And to me, I think he did wonders with Kyler Murray. He had him in college for 1 year at Texas Tech. It's just they could never finish the season well because they were always hurt toward the end of the year. If they weren't hurt, I think it would have been a different story.
So, Chris, I'm trying to ask, are you saying that there just need to be more black faces just because?
No, not just because. I think we'll get a better product if we have more diversity. I look at what the New York Jets do. Look what they're doing. They're not the greatest story, but it's a good story. With Robert Saleh being a Muslim, he's a person of color. Look how he's changed that organization. He really has changed. Basically, every game he's basically changing the foundation of that organization. They get more and more attention every week, especially if they win. And even if they don't win, he still has them competing week in and week out. They're not a sad story like they were from the regime before. Because when Adam Gates was there, that was horrible. That was the worst hiring I've ever seen for that organization. That guy was a plain joke in New York and in Miami. I don't even know why he got a head coaching job. And that's another problem you see in the NFL, especially with guys that when they trying to hire coaches, because they want them like Sean McVay, and a lot of those coaches ain't working out, or they want a Belichick clone, and that's not even working out. You see what just happened to Josh McDaniels, which I thought was a wrong hire from the start, because the interim coach had the team by the heart. That team wanted to go all out for that coach. He had their heart. Those guys were ready to die for that coach, and the owner decided to get rid of him for Josh McDaniels, who nobody on that team wanted from the start. And now he realizes, I did make a mistake. Well, it's a year and a half too late. You shouldn't have made that change. You should have kept the coach you had.
I would not credit the Jets' success to the fact that their head coach is a Muslim and a minority.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
I think that's completely irrelevant.
No, I don't. It's not completely irrelevant. I'm just saying, I'm just taking it as an example as how well he is, how well of a coach he is. Because a lot of times they feel like blacks aren't good leaders, or they don't have the team. It's how it goes. They always come up with some negative criticism that's not really true.
What?
And I think Flores was a good coach, but he had integrity, and he wasn't about to do what the owner wanted him to do. And that's a lot of these owners, they don't really care if they win or lose. All they want to do is make money. And they'll toss money around left and right to see if this is going to work or that's going to work. And some of them just don't care. They just like, okay, here's some money just so you can get out of my hand.
What do you think, Brian?
This not being a subject that I'm extremely well versed on, I've just watched football and sports my entire life and seen what I've seen. I'm a more empirical person. I try to look for evidence-based outcomes, or can I find evidence for what I think I'm seeing? And it brings a curious question to me, because a few things are obvious. There are a very large number of players that are people of color, as Chris would say. And I would even go as far as to say the majority at this point, if you look at the professional ranks and even down through the Division I college ranks in the top 50 schools. Now, I'm not saying just because you're a player, that translates into you're a good coach one day. But I would be very curious as to what the background, if we took every NFL coach and assistant coach right now, and every top 25 D1 college coach and assistant coach right now, and asked how many of them are former players. I don't have the answer to that question, but in that data, I believe it would point to a reality that I think I understand. And it is that everything is a transition. I think, like Chris was saying, it's not entirely that it's the guy is a Muslim, or that they have success, but it does play a part in that they were open to putting the best person in. But I think the transition is in understanding. It's like you said, rewind back to 1960, 1970. All right, best quarterback is a black guy. No, forget about it. Right? And that conversation got changed a little more and a little more and a little more every decade that went by. Well, now we have all sorts of black quarterbacks all over the college, and nobody bats an eye at action. In fact, a lot of fan bases I'll just speak with candor on this. A lot of fan bases go, oh, all right, darn, our quarterback is not the, he's not the guy from last year. But now translate that up further, translate that up into coaching. I think we are witnessing a transition right now where it is partially still true that people are still getting used to the concept of black people in these leadership positions further up than quarterback of the team. I think they're still getting used to it. I don't think we can discount that influence, but I'd love to see the data. I think I'm going to do a little digging because I'd love to see the data on it. Like, what is the distribution? Because is it that, how can so many black people want to play the sport and love the sport and be involved with the sport, but so few actually make that step? Is it that they're not interested? Is it that they're not? Is it that they expect they won't? Because there's some of that too, right? If you expect you're not going to get hired, then you might not go for it in the first place. But anyway, yeah. I get off my soapbox. I just think there's still a portion of it that has to do with the social issues that we're dealing with in this country. How much of it will people make that decision? You know what? I think I want to go 6-5 instead of 11-0 and have this white guy. I don't think anybody has said that.
I guess for me, man, I have to make corporate decisions all the time, right? I have to, part of in my professional life, I have to make decisions that are going to affect the outcome of the business. And I don't have the luxury of infusing my personal bias in the decisions that I make. I may 100% believe that this person is an idiot. But despite my personal belief, and Brian, we've kind of touched on this before, my personal belief has nothing to do with my professional decisions. Professionally, if this is the best person for the job, that's where my decision is going to go, because I'm trying to safeguard the business in my profession. And I don't doubt that there are personal biases in how people think and feel. I don't know if you're ever going to get rid of that.
No, you won't. You won't. I mean, the Chicago Bears are a prime example of that. Look at the decision that picked Mitch Trubisky when you had Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes in the same draft. That was a personal decision because the general manager was good friends with Trubisky's father. And you see how that turned out to be a disaster.
Is he still the general manager?
No, he's fired.
And that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point. I don't think in any corporate system, I don't think you have the luxury to make those kind of decisions. And that's the reason why. Because your stakeholders are interested in the product.
Right.
They're interested in how things look on the field in this scenario. And the idea that we just not going to hire, this guy is the best qualified, he's perfect for what we want to do, but we're not going to go in that direction because we're trying to maintain a certain image. I just don't think they're and maybe I'm alone in this. The idea that you have a Rooney Rule in the NFL and that you have to interview a black person is a terrible idea to me. I hate that. It does not serve the organization not to interview and hire the best person, regardless of what they look like.
Does that exist?
That's all you need in order to address personal bias, I think.
Well, the thing is, we got to look at when that rule was implemented. I mean, this rule was implemented. I think we were in high school, or just out of high school, when this rule was implemented. Wow. The problem is, it just was a joke because they treated it as a joke.
So first of all, for anybody listening, Chris is old. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm younger than.
Yeah, about 3 months. But anyway, it's just. I mean, when the rule was set up, it's like that rule. It was just like what Bush did with "Don't Leave a Child Behind." It was a good idea in theory, but it doesn't work. Same thing with the Rooney Rule. It was a good idea in theory, but it didn't work because we knew darn well, any black person in America knew darn well, they're like, oh, all I got to do is interview a black person and get them off my back. That's all they were going to do. We knew it was going to be a joke. Now, did it help in some situations? The only real situation it really helped in was the hiring of Mike Tomlin for Pittsburgh. They would have never hired Mike Tomlin if they hadn't adhered to that rule. That's the only one. Others, they already had a general idea of, when they hired the other black coaches, like, okay, I really like this guy. I like how he's doing on this team. I like how I talked to other players. I talked to agents. I talked to other executives. Like, yeah, hire this guy. He's a real deal.
Wow.
He'll do right by your team.
That's a bad example, man. I'm a Browns fan, so Mike Tomlin is a terrible hire, and I hate that they ever did that.
No, it ain't no terrible hire. It was a terrible hire because he didn't get hired by the Browns. But I'm just saying, I mean, it worked in their situation because they weren't even looking at Mike Tomlin. But for the fact that they had to adhere to that rule, they were able to bring him in. And when they brought him in and started talking to him, they fell in love with him. They're like, well, hell, this is the best guy out of anybody we interviewed.
Yeah, so
they kept coming back to him, and then finally they hired him. But look at him; he's been the longest tenured coach besides Belichick, and he's been to the Super Bowl, 3 times or 2 times? 2 times, right?
2 times and won, I think. Yeah.
And never had a losing season, something that Belichick can't say, you know? So it worked in that scenario, but it's not sustainable before the fact because some organizations are not going to take it seriously. First of all, we know the Cowboys ain't never going to take it seriously. I don't think Jerry Jones will ever hire a black coach.
I disagree with that.
He's had plenty of time.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
I don't.
I disagree with that. I think if the best available coach is black, that's what Jerry Jones wants to win. More than anything else. More than anything else.
He's had every opportunity. He's hired the most head coaches in the NFL since he's been the owner. Okay? He's had plenty of time. He's owned the team since 1988, Clean. We're talking about 35 years, and I think he's hired at least 20 coaches in that time.
That's a lot of coaches.
He's had plenty of opportunity.
Opportunity to do what? Are you saying that he's not hiring the best ones? I don't have a problem with any of his other hires.
So you trying to say Dave Campbell was the best one? You trying to say
against who?
You think Garrett was the best one?
We have to go back and look at the pool. Against who?
He had horrible hires going ever since. I would say. I mean, I know some people think Switcher was a bad hire, but Switcher still won the Super Bowl, and the team was successful under him. He hadn't had a good head coach. I mean, even when he hired Bill Parcells, it was just Parcells was past his prime. He never had a good hire. I mean, right now McCarthy's a decent hire. I mean, I know McCarthy's won a Super Bowl, but McCarthy had issues in Green Bay, and it led to him being fired. But I'm just saying, he's had plenty of opportunities to hire a black head coach, Clean. I mean, plenty.
You're saying it like that should be the deciding factor.
No, I'm not saying it's the deciding factor, but I think he should have hired a black coach by now, though. He's been on the team for over 35 years, and he's hired the most head coaches than anybody else in the NFL.
I think that is statistically relevant, and that it is relevant to the point of raising the question. If you've hired 20 plus coaches over 35 years, now if we analyze that data, we can say, okay, wait, and none of them were non-white coaches. Okay, so does that mean it's race-based? No, not at that point. But what you then have to do is dig a little deeper into the data and go to, I think, a question that Kaleem asked, against who?
I agree.
So you go back through those 20 hires and say, who were they competing against at the time? Because if the only people, and again, from, in some of the 80s, a lot of the black coaches that were really good didn't even apply because they knew no one's going to give me that job. Or they thought that and thus never got the opportunity. So I look at it both ways. And so, but if you start looking into the, mid 90s up until now and see that there has been, a good 40% of the applicants were black and not one of them got hired since then you have a definite statistical thing that says, okay, something to do with the way these guys look, how close their freckles are had to do with whether, they got hired. Now, again, I'm talking about with the data saying it. If 40% of those interviewed, how could we say that none of them ever were more qualified than the other folks? We'd have to actually look at who they were. I'm just saying, to be conclusive, we'd have to know who the competition was and be able to say, okay, right here in this one, hands down, this one was much better than the other and didn't get hired. And I messed up earlier. It's not intrinsic bias. That's what I call it, intrinsic, but they call it softer, implicit bias. It's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
But, I think you have to always stop and look like you're in a court of law almost when you talk about these things, and be very careful, because a lot of in these conversations, as we all know, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. It's not what you think, it's what can you prove. If you can't prove it, you might as well not even say it.
Right.
But there are things that we all know. When you bring up corporate America, let me get 30 more seconds. When you bring up corporate America, I've been in part of corporate America since, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this out loud. I've been a part of corporate America since 1998. And I can tell you for sure that implicit bias plays a big part in who gets chosen and who doesn't get chosen in many cases. And does the better, more qualified person get the position? I can use one data point, and that's myself, and just say that I competed with a guy that was the exact same age as I am. The only thing he was about 3 inches taller than me. He had less leadership experience than me, and I can say this on 2 different occasions in my career. The one guy had no degree whatsoever at all, and they gave him the promotion instead of me. When everyone in the group was saying, oh, yeah, it's you hands down. But as soon as we would go to lunch or around that corner where there's no cameras and no one's listening, they look me right in the eye and go, man, it's not quite likely. they're not going to let you into that position. And so and with others, I'll put it that way. So I know that in corporate America, corporate world, you could even say, because what doesn't corporate America influence if it's got corporate on it? It does matter. It absolutely does matter. It is factored in. It's something that we have to fight against. It's something that we have to fight against two sides of it, though. Like I said, we have to fight against the urge to say, I shouldn't even try because they're not going to. No, you're just defeating yourself and then blaming something that hasn't proven itself yet. But we also have to go very hard towards what we want, whether it's corporate leadership, whether it's sports leadership. And the one other thing I'll say before I step back down off this thing is in the corporate world, yeah, you don't often have the luxury of making those decisions like that. But in the athletic world, where a lot of people are making millions of dollars a year and they're not so concerned about whether you fire me tomorrow. And in many cases, it is the top guy. Because one thing we also know about corporate America, it's top down. If the top guy is a jerk, the organization filters jerk down through it all the way to when you get to supervisors on the floor. So, it's like there's some of the people who are making these decisions behind the scenes are unheard. They have the luxury of being completely biased. And I think the term, how the product looks on the field or looks on the sidelines, is still very important to a lot of people. I won't point fingers and say I know for sure who, but in this day and age, I'd be willing to bet my retirement that if everybody turned blue that was biased in that way in the athletic world, we'd have a neon night one night if you turned out all the lights.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Funny you bring that up. I had to take an implicit bias awareness training module about a month ago, and clearly I retained none of it. I think the point that, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the point that Chris was trying to make was that this was explicit bias. This is. And to use his Jerry Jones example, Jerry Jones had an opportunity to hire a better candidate and chose not to explicitly because he did not want to hire someone he didn't want the leader of his program to be a non-white person explicitly. And if it's implicit in subconscious, I think we all have that. But I don't think you could get away with our current culture that kind of explicit discrimination. I mean, that's just the way it would appear to me. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chris, but is that where in your Jerry Jones example, is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, that's where I was going with it because and he's not the only team. I'm not just singling him out. I'm just stating the obvious because he's had ample opportunity. And I mean, you got to realize he took over the team even before Tony Dungy was the head coach. You see what he did with two franchises, how well he did with them. Mike Tomlin, Herm Edwards.
So
Ray Rhodes. Guys, these were black head coaches that were successful coaching at the team. Now, not all of them won a Super Bowl, but they were successful in getting them to the playoffs and having a winning record when they left the organization.
And to Brian's point, were those men available at the point of hire, and were they the best candidate in the pool at the time? And I agree with Brian. I think you need those two pieces of data in order to be able to make a call, because it's easy to look at it in retrospect and say, oh yeah, we should have he could have went here and he could have went there. But what was his options at the moment? What pool did he have to choose from? I just find it hard to think that he would sabotage his team to that degree. I just find that hard to believe.
Well, I don't think
he's too he wants to be successful.
The actions just says but his actions say different though. You know what I mean? I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's hard to believe that an owner or CEOs or shareholders would do that. But, you and I know darn well that we've seen it before with certain corporations and certain stuff like, Brian made an example that, he's seen people get hired that he had a guy that didn't even have a degree for a position that he has a degree to hold the job he holds. We've seen it happen just to keep us out of that spot. It happens. I mean, you got to realize, look at the era he grew up in, man. Even if he's not full racist, he has racist ideology and racist tendencies. You know what I mean?
I think it's tough to say what he specifically has because none of us know him. But I'll take it back to the micro mirrors the macro. What happens on the smaller level mirrors what happens on the large. Take it down to were college coaches whose jobs were dependent on winning games. How many of them and for how long turned into losers because they did not want black players on their teams? So when we say, why would they take the chance, or it's not, they don't have the luxury, these types of biases have proven over and over again to transcend what we would all, the rest of us, the people who don't care about color and just want the best guy. It transcends the concepts that we think of. It doesn't make any sense. And again, but what you said, it was also true, Kaleem. After a while, they were just like, you know what? I'm tired of my basketball team losing.
Right. Right.
It seems that, and I'm going to put a qualifier here because I don't want to perpetuate any stereotypes. It seems like this group of people that has participated on the sidelines in this very cheap and affordable sport are pretty darn good at it now. And we're not letting them play on our teams, and they're kicking our butts. So after a while, it became, it is my job. And you know what? I better start winning. And I think you just raise that up level after level after level. And it's the same type of reticence.
I applaud that though, man. Like I don't think that the idea of there's never been, we don't let black people play baseball and, oh, you know what? That's just wrong. And we need to do right. Okay. We're going to let y'all play. I don't like that narrative.
Right.
I like the narrative of I want to win.
Mm-hmm.
And he can help us win. I don't care what he looks like. Let me go sign Jackie Robinson because I want to win. To me, I would think that societally, if you want to get past the idea of racist ideologies and look past what someone looks like and judge them on who they are and what they can do, that is exactly, and not to pick on you, Chris, I'm saying this because I hear this a lot. I hear this romantic notion that Jerry Jones didn't do this and he had the opportunity to, as though he has an obligation to black people, as though he should have just to say that, yes, I'm not racist, I'm going to hire a black person. And I disagree with that premise. And I think that's where my heartburn is. If Jerry Jones is not hiring black people and is not hiring the best person available simply because they're black, then he's a poor owner. He's not a racist. He's a poor owner. He's not doing what's best for his business. And the fact that yes, we can look historically and see where those kinds of decisions were being made, but I'm hard pressed to think that in the last 25, 30 years, anybody is explicitly choosing not to hire at any level anywhere. In the climate that we have right now, there's not a gas station owner anywhere that's in a position to get picky about who wants to work for them, so much so that I don't want this type of person, I don't want that type of person, because they need people to hire. even if they can't stand this blue-haired transsexual, can't stand that personally. But you know what? I need to hire someone, and their business need overrides their personal biases. And I would hope that that's the way that we move past these kind of discussions, because it's just better holistically for us as a society. Kind of switch gears a little bit. Anybody who voted for Barack Obama just to have a black president you're doing a disservice to the system. If you didn't vote for him because you thought he was the best candidate, how does that help anything? How does that help? He should have won based on what he's able to do, right? I mean, that's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, you had people that really did, especially black people and people of color that voted for him for that reason and thinking that he was going to do this and that for him. But a lot of people don't understand too is you had a whole lot of white folks that voted for him because they believed in what he was putting
and
out
what
there.
in his platform. Yes, 100%.
And if people, I get tired when I hear blacks say, "Well, he didn't do nothing for blacks." I said, "Well, if you had listened to his speech on the night he was elected, you would have understood why some of the things didn't get done. He said we would not get there because we were so far in the hole. It was going to take, and we're still out of it. That's why stuff is so darn high right now. All the stuff that pushed it, I mean, even Trump struggled with it. You know what I mean? Even when he took over and tried to do what he wanted to do, he also realized, well, damn, man, because he could have easily got rid of Obamacare, but he realized, well, if I get rid of Obamacare, a whole lot of people are going to be
he couldn't have easily gotten rid of it. They tried. They tried.
I mean, he tried. I didn't say he didn't try. But he also realized, too, when he did try, like, oh, wait a minute. I can get rid of some of it, but I can't get rid of all of it. He knew good enough if he got rid of all of it, he was going to hurt them. That helped him get elected. He realized, well, shoot, I'm going to mess myself up.
I got to throw a flag.
When I saw that, I said, okay, he realizes it's still pretty good for a majority of Americans. I'm not going to get rid of all of it. I'll just get rid of this little stuff that we really don't need, which, you could debate that, too, if you needed it or not. But I mean, you could see that was like one of the moments that he really, he did do something like half decently, because there's a lot of other stuff he didn't do right. We could debate all that too. But I'm just saying that's, you got to realize.
What I'd say is, if I start in on politics, it's not going to stop. So I'm just going to leave that right where it's
right.
and just I'm going to say, yes. You're right, both of you, on that. And I'll leave that right there where it is. As far as the romantic concept that you mentioned, Kaleem, and it goes back to, again, who's the best candidate? The whole content of character, not color of skin, right? I think that is the romanticism, because that's where we are clearly not at. And I think we have a long way to go before we actually get there. And I believe that, yes, that's what I would do, right? I can say that. That's what I would do if I started a business. I want to hire the best freaking people that can do the job, the people that I think I can depend on and can carry out the tasks I need them to carry out. I wouldn't care if the person was gay, if the person had blue hair, if the person was white, Asian, whatever. I don't care. I want the business stable and running well. However, again, what I would say is why good people, if you look at the world around us, why good people tend to lose is because the bad people, and I'll just say evil. I'll say evil people always have an advantage over good people. Good people never can quite conceive of the capability of those evil people. They can't conceive it. It doesn't make any sense. It's not right. How could they do it that way? But they do. And that's what always catches good people by surprise. And that's why a lot of times when something terrible happens, you always hear people going, "Oh my gosh, that's surprising." But if you talk to them off the camera, they're going to say, "No, I'm not surprised at all. Like, I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't think they would really do it. They would stoop to that level." And all I can say is, in my view of this world and the people in it, seriously, I'm willing to go to 97, 98% of the people in this world just want a fair shot, and they'll give a fair shot. But there's very, very influential group of people in every group of people, and within the group of black people, within white people, within Asian people, that are just plain racist, biased, and they just don't want to let go of it. And people in each one of those groups will tell you, oh, yes, we have those people. And unfortunately, a lot of them are still in positions of authority. They're in hiring authority. They're in leadership. And they cause problems. And they cause those problems still. Sports is like the canary in the coal mine for everything else in the world.
You bring up a good point, man. There's a young lady that is we're hoping to have on the show soon, and one of the things that she wants to talk about is the good old boy system, right? And from her perspective as a woman, how hard it is to get treated fairly, get a fair shake. How difficult that is in that environment, and she's not talking about from 40 years ago. This is, stuff that she experienced last year. So, I have to concede that some of that, there's some of that does exist. I just not necessarily believe in people so much as you can be selfish and self-serving. And if these actions help you, why would you harm yourself in the name of trying to support some ideology? But I take your point. I do. I take your point.
Well, you got people that still do that though, Kaleem. I mean, you got people on both sides of the aisle that does that though. Do that and still hurt themselves, vote against their wishes and needs really because they like a certain candidate. And I think that's wrong. You should be voting for the best person for the job, but unfortunately that hasn't happened in a long time for certain positions.
Yeah, it's you've been in California too long, Chris. You gotta you got this West Coast.
Oh man.
Yeah.
No, it's not a West Coast thing.
I know this isn't a politics discussion, but in a representative democracy, you're supposed to have differences in thought, opinion, priorities, objections, considerations. You're supposed to have that. This idea, this notion that everybody is supposed to think the same, or that there's just one way to go at it. This is what the absolute truth is on a particular issue, scares me. And I don't care which end of the spectrum is promoting that. I don't like the idea of we all need to think about this the same way, or we all need to look at it the same way. That sounds scary to me. That sounds like China.
Well, the thing is that's it's scary, like you said. But it's also like the old saying goes, like they said, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And you can use that for anything because everybody sees things so differently. I mean, husbands and wives see things differently. Brothers and sisters see things differently. Cousins and aunts, uncles and grandmothers and everybody sees something differently. And like you said, it's scary if you want everybody to be on the same page because now I don't even want to really think about that. Difference is what makes us whole. We have to work through our differences. We have to bring a different thing to the table. When we bring the same thing over and over and over, it's not going to work. And I mean, we're seeing right now, like, I think our biggest problem is that we have these new generations coming in, and they're coming in with their ideas that the older generation just totally just hates. So we have to find a happy place between both people. Not just people, but everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that's new. I think if we could go back to '92, I think the older generation at the time were looking at us like we were insane. In some respects, rightly so.
But the only thing is, though, Clean, during that older generation, that moment was like, it wasn't like a total hate thing. It was more like, we ain't ready to give up our spot yet. And I mean, that's true today too, but it's like, it's at a whole different level now. I mean, it's It's like, dude, really, why do you really care? You about to be gone in a year, from year to 5 years from now. You know, let us have our time. Let us do what we need to do. And I get it. It's, you know, like you said, you can see that in any generation, but it's so much at the 8th degree. And I think it's because of social media, because they have a platform. Everybody has a platform, and everything gets blown out of proportion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you see all these videos now, like with Candace Owens and what's that? What's his name? Ferguson and Roland Martin and the guys from Media Touch and the Dollar Guy. All those guys on YouTube and stuff, right? They always debating all this stuff. But a lot of that stuff is like, are we really debating about what somebody wants to do to themselves or what they want to do this and that? When we should be debating the issue at hand, like what's going on with the war, what's going on with homelessness, what's going on with our votes, what's going on with our rights.
Yes,
you know what I mean? I mean, some of them are doing that, but a lot of times it's like you see the videos, it's all harp on something that we don't really need to be talking about. Really, just it's more of a personal issue than a people issue. You know?
Yes, indeed. That is a surrogate battle. That's what they call those. And we are, that's what you're talking about is right on point. I mean, we're being directed towards what's called surrogate battles, surrogate arguments, meaning there are clearly things in our society that are so weird and strange and unnecessary for us to put so much emphasis into, for our government to put so much force behind. And it's making everybody fight because they're obvious things that everybody's not going to agree on. They hit fundamental physical and mental barriers for people. They're evolutionarily, if you buy that, toxic concepts, but they have nothing to do with what's really wrong with the world. They start us arguing over whether, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad enough. And I'll just say it wasn't bad enough for us to argue about whether a man wanted to marry a man. That didn't work well enough. The people who said, I'm never going to be with that, just said, I'm not. And that was it. So they had to go and mess with children. Okay. They had to take the surrogate battle to another level, something where people have a hard time turning their attention away from it and saying, wait a minute, I don't have anything to say something about that. I've got to. You're talking about children here. But it takes away from how much was the rent? How much was the interest rate?
Right.
How much was the dinner for the family the other night? All of those things that we really should be asking these people. And I'll stop here. I'll say this. You know better about what a thing cares about and is going to do anything about, what's really important to it, not so much by what it says and does, but by looking at what it never says and never does.
Yeah, I like that, man. I think that we have. I want to circle back to something that Chris was alluding to a minute ago. I'm trying to bring this back to to the bias discussion that we were having earlier. I really think that we have some societal barriers to what we really consider to be acceptable. And I think part of the challenge is, do you really have the luxury to call for diversity in the areas where you're comfortable? Do you have the right to call for equality on the issues that you feel require equality? Because there's a lot of cognitive dissonance sometimes, where a person who they are against abortion but pro-vaccine. So do you believe in bodily autonomy or not? On the one issue, they like the idea of a person being able to have control over their body, but on another issue, they don't like the idea of a person having control over their body. And I've noticed a lot of that kind of dissonance and disagreement. And we don't have to get into all of that right now, but I think it's part of the challenge of being in a open and free society. And this is kind of why, Brian and I want to foster these kind of discussions for the very point, Chris, that you were making, that you're right. Why are we talking about issue A or issue B or issue C instead of the things that really, really matter to people? And it's hard, unfortunately, or at least when I try to find those kind of discussions, they're hard to find. It's real easy to find a conversation about Hunter Biden's laptop or whether or not Donald Trump may have been a shady business person in the 80s. That's not hard to find. But
Right.
but
Anybody that was alive then knew darn well what he was doing.
I mean,
it's old news to you and me.
it's off subject, but it is such a frustration and a pet peeve of mine. Donald Trump was the quintessential real estate mogul in the most cutthroat real estate market in America. And you are surprised that he may have had some questionable practices at some point. What are we talking about here? What does that have to do with anything? Why is this front page news every day? I don't care. I don't care any more than I care about what any other New York real estate mogul may have been doing, trying to get a leg up in that cutthroat market. I don't see the relevance in it. But I digress. That's the conversation for another day.
The thing is, it's just that's not gonna put food on the table for somebody that doesn't have a job. It's not going to create jobs. It's not going to help our economy. You know what I'm saying? We're hashing over stuff that's anybody who was alive there knew darn well what he was doing, and not just him, anybody else that was in that damn business.
Right.
And it's just the problem is a lot of these young people don't know none of that because they weren't alive, and they weren't taught that because each generation in school now is getting taught less and less than the previous generation. And you know that all you got to do is talk to your parents. And you know good and well you don't know probably even half of what they knew.
But there's a trade-off for that, though. That's another discussion we can unpack another day. But there's a trade-off for that. They didn't have the technology. You had to know it because you didn't have the same technology available that's available today. But that's another discussion we can have.
You didn't have the technology, but word of mouth was a good technology back then, though.
You know what amazes me, guys? Like, of all of this, you know what I think is the most important point we can take from all of this? I want you guys to tell me what the 80s and 90s are like, because you guys are old, man. I'm telling you. How do you, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
What were the 80s and 90s like? One day, just sit me down and tell me about it. That's, goodness gracious. Woo.
You just had to,
crazy, man.
You just had to be there. That's all I'm going to say. You had to be there. No, he was there. I'm saying to anyone who might be asking that question.
Rumors.
You just had to be there. You just had to be there. Sorry you missed the show.
Yeah, it was a show, all
right. We are at an hour, gentlemen.
All right.
I appreciate the both of you. I'd like to give you the opportunity to close out with any closing thoughts. I know we've had kind of a wide-ranging discussion. I thought it was good, and I appreciate both the candor from both of you.
I guess my closing thought on this would be, because the objective that we have here with this endeavor is to make good communication happen. I think Kaleem said it best. The answer to poor speech is not more poor speech or canceling it. It's better speech. People need to talk to each other. People need to do, and before they speak, before the speech, do the empirical research, figure out what exactly happened to the best of your ability, and I'm joking about how old I am. I'm as old as both of you guys. So it's about doing the research, finding out what really happened, finding out what's really going on before weighing in on it and maybe pushing buttons that make everybody stop. Because once you say, and we all know this is frustrating, once you say racism, you've just lost 50% of the white people in the room. Because,
exactly.
Number one, you got to put yourself in the shoes of a white person because, okay, I'm a white person. I'm not racist. I've never done anything racist before. But when everybody brings that word up, people start looking my direction like, I qualify, and you just want to get away from that, if you can imagine, more than being a part of it. So we got to be careful throwing that out. But if you say to them 30 plus years, 20 hires. Now let's go look, like I said before, let's go look under the hood and see what was actually there. Now you can get them to walk with you. Now you can get somebody to look and say, you know what? You're not accusing me. You're not throwing things out. You're not just randomly saying this. It's a discussion. And oh, wow, look at that. The evidence says no black people ever applied. so you're dead wrong.
Right.
Or the evidence says, my goodness, 4 of the greatest coaches in the history of football applied and they didn't get hired, but one way or the other, the discussion has to be done. And before everyone leaves the table in any discussion, they should be able to shake hands. Because if they can't, that discussion was not productive.
I was trying to hear the last part. I couldn't hear because it was a little static on my end. But I heard him say something about, the racism and, like, you got to be careful what, putting that word out. Is that right? Was that what you were saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, if you were having trouble hearing him, his I don't want to paraphrase everything that he just said, but yeah, the idea of it may look one way to you, but your subjective view may not be what's actual in reality. And it's important to have dialogue and discussion and to do research so that you can know what the actual case is and not make snap judgments about people based upon your subjective view or your limited information. I apologize if I paraphrase too much, Brian, but that
I got to just I agree with him too. Like you said, I heard him say that you have to also look at it from a white person's perspective too, because a lot of them they don't spend a lot of time around us. Not a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot that do, but not.
I think that depends on where you are. I don't know about that, but go ahead.
But I'm just saying, there's a lot of them that don't. Like you can kind of get a sense of the ones that had never even been around us. Okay, the way they act around. But it's like you say, it's basically like you can't judge a book by its cover. You kind of have to have patience to realize if they're being racist or not. I mean, I've done it myself. There's times where I've gone to try to go handle business, and the way their body language is given to me, like, okay, they're giving the kind of that to me a racial vibe, right? Like they're just not gonna give me my money like I need because I'm black or something like that. I could probably say that, but I have to realize, okay, just be patient because they're probably just doing their job. They're not being racist. They're just doing their job and following protocols that they have to follow in order to get you where you need to be. And then when you be patient, you see that they weren't like that, then you be like, okay, yeah, I was wrong. Okay, I could be mad enough.
If you have an opportunity, I would love for the three of us to sit down again. You just brought up an amazing point. Why, in that scenario, why was your initial assumption that this was race-based discrimination or hatred? Why was that your initial assumption? And then for you to...
Because I have experienced racism firsthand.
No. I'm not asking you to defend it now. I'm just curious. I'm just curious as to why. Yeah, why that might be the case. I want to.
That's the problem with a lot of us because you never know. And then also too, it can also happen from you being taught.
So
we do emulate what our parents do, in some shape or form.
I think that's worth unpacking at a later time. That's an interesting point. But I want to be respectful of you guys' time. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. I think this has been a fantastic discussion, man, and I really do appreciate you guys. So thank you both.
Thank you, and thank you, Chris.
Nice talking to you, Brian.
Same here, man. Hello, everyone. This is Brian. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to support us and our mission to foster real dialogue, you can find us on most major social media sites, including Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, Threads, and TikTok. Just search for the Fourth Branch Podcast with a numeric 4. Please reach out to us if you have a comment or an idea for a show. We mean it when we say we want to hear from everyone, and we're serious about including you in the conversation. Got a topic that you're passionate about? Let's talk about it. We'd love to get you on the show and allow you to express your views. Once again, thanks for listening. Can't wait to talk to you soon.